turned over a bright metal shell that rippled when
She says human longing for mystery leads to a commonality of belief in immortality.
Dad's later, I'm early. Either way, I have time to scout the pens.
Redemption and claustrophobia are what artists understand. Not valuing
My name is Christine Pappas, and I was born in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I am a lifelong reader of Nebraska authors. And although my career now is a political science professor, I teach at East Central University in Ada, Oklahoma, I've always read Nebraska authors, and I've always tried to find places in my life for them. So this led me to work in the Heritage Room for 5 years, which was a really excellent experience, and also try to promote authors as well as I could in any possible way, writing reviews in the Lincoln Journal, editing Plainsong Review, just whatever I could come up with to do, I would try to do it. I attended the University of Nebraska, and I got many degrees there. I received a BA in political science in 1992, a master's in political science in 1995, a law degree in 1997, and then my PhD in 2002. So I recommend the University of Nebraska. It's a terrific place to go to school. Dorothy Thomas went to school there for years, and they also have graduated many renowned authors. Well, one of the questions I find most interesting is the effects that sense of place exerts on someone and how that changes you to have grown up in a place. I don't do a lot of creative writing on my own, but as an editor and as a critic, I think that my values system is very much shaped by having grown up in Nebraska. Sort of a no-nonsense style of lay it out there and not afraid to critique something that might be subpar. So I think in a lot of ways I'm shaped by having grown up in the Midwest, grown up in Nebraska. But it's different than actually writing about the Midwest because that's not what I do. I began writing for the Lincoln Journal-Star reviews in 96 was the first time that they ran one of my reviews, and I still write. This is 2002, so it's been several years. I also wrote a column called Nebraska Bookshelf for a number of years, and so that was a monthly column. I think it was 2000 and 2001. I wrote it until I moved to Oklahoma, and then I couldn't do it anymore. I wasn't in Nebraska. One of the authors that I've always enjoyed reading is Willa Cather, and she's one that has tried to write in a more intelligent and sweeping way. And I think as I try to read her novels and understand how she approaches her subject, I am really in deep appreciation for someone who can see life and art in such a broad way. One of the things she wrote is that humans have a need to categorize things. And then if you think about people's psychology, that is indeed what they try to do. So in my own thinking, I try to not let myself go into the easy category, but to look at things more broadly and try to unite different disciplines. So I would call Willa Cather one of the people that inspires me. And also Loren Eiseley and his sense of discipline and writing. I mean, he's another person who is an inspiration to me. But in my career in political science and the law, there's another author, Roscoe Pound, who was dean of the University of Nebraska Law College before moving on to Harvard. He and his grasp of macro systems of law is just amazing. So people like that I would find inspirational. I think that there is a distinction to be made between being a writer, one who writes themselves, and then one who critiques the writing of others. And most of my writing that I do for my pleasure is as a critic and as a reviewer. And I didn't want to be that. I wanted to be the writer, the artist. But as I attempted and didn't do very well in those attempts, and as I saw gaps and places where I could go and be a critic, it sort of caused me to rise to the occasion. I think a pivotal time in my life was when I was in law school, and I would read the Lincoln Journal-Star, and I would note how their book review section seemed like it was lacking. And so I decided, something has to be done. And so I called the Journal and said, I wish that the reviews were better. And they said, oh, really? Well, why don't you write one? And so that was a time when I had to do what I said I could do, and that was begin to write reviews. And so probably at that time I realized that my position would not be as an artist, but as someone who not only critiques the arts, but also acts as a mouthpiece, brings them to other people who wouldn't otherwise be exposed to them. And I think that's what the Heritage Room is all about. It's acting as a mouthpiece for Nebraska authors. The books sit on the shelves, but they can't speak for themselves, so we must speak for them. I think the thing that inspires me most as a writer, as a critic, is a deadline. Great amounts of stress is really the thing that will cause me to get motivated. And there'll be times when I'll work a great deal at one time, and I'll work for 18 hours a day, but then the next day I might not work at all. So it's just the deadline. It's certainly not methodical. It's not disciplined at all. Well, one thing as a reviewer and as a critic that I struggle with is how much of the person that I'm reviewing, how much of their flaws do I want to reveal? And if I note something in a book I'm reviewing that I just find terrible, do I want to bring that up in the review? And on one hand, my job is to promote reading and to get people to read books. So if I say negative things a lot in my reviews or in my critical work, then that's going to, in essence, turn people off to reading. So I think my voice has changed because I've had to try to balance being overly positive with being overly negative, to try to find a way to praise a work without overlooking its flaws. So how can I naturally combine the negative and the positive? So that's something that's evolved, and I think for any reviewer it has to evolve. As far as having met our authors, having worked at the Heritage Room, we would meet authors a lot. So I have met a lot of them, and that does color my reviews, because for one thing, I can choose to not review the books of an author who I don't care for. So I would think the way it's biased me more is I have chosen to review more books of people I liked instead of not reviewing people I didn't like. And in terms of meeting someone, I've met Kent Haroof, I've met Jody Shields, the author of The Fig Eater, and they were not particularly friendly, but that was just because of the forum of having met them in a crowd and things like that. So I try not to let it color me too much on how I view them. It's easy to write either a good or a bad review. It's hard to be balanced. You figure out the best thing about a book, and you figure out the worst thing about, and then you sort of set those things aside and you try to get at other things that the author's doing. So I think I try to withhold, if I feel hyperbole coming on, I try to suppress it. It's hard to imagine the audience that one writes for, because you hope for the best, you hope for the widest possible audience, but it's going to be a fairly narrow critical audience that picks up a work like this book, the Getaway and Other Stories. It's going to be a fairly literate audience. So I think I kind of, in my dream of dreams, I hope that I'm reaching a wider audience, and I write to help introduce a topic to a larger audience that might not be aware of it. But I think I know that I'm just talking to a few people who really love reading and really love reading about authors. I really love the idea of humanities, the idea of a humanities scholar distilling the essence of an artistic work and bringing it to a larger audience. So I think of myself in sort of that way, as someone who takes perhaps a more complex set of thoughts or a complex artist and tries to make it understandable to people who just simply haven't had the time to figure it out for themselves. And as a professor of political science, I'm doing this all the time because I really want the students to see the patterns of politics, what's really happening, and they don't have time to figure it out, but perhaps if I give them a leg up, maybe they will. In my own career, I think I've been extremely fortunate, because whenever I've embarked on a project, I've had lots of support from other people. So I've gotten support. When I set out to found the journal Plainsong Review, it happened easily. I mean, I got some fiscal support, I got all kinds of other support in terms of editing resources. So I've been really lucky, and I try to figure out, what is it? Am I just lucky? And I think the issue is thinking of yourself as a writer, envisioning the project, and that will help you sell it to other people. That will help sell your work to other people. So you have to take yourself seriously, or else other people won't take you seriously. So when beginning writers would come to me as editor of Plainsong Review and ask about how they should launch their writing career, all I can tell them is to write and to see themselves as a writer, and then soon other people would too. But there are only so many John Grishams in the world who can make their life on writing. The point is also to be able to balance the writing with something else, so that you can be a writer, but you're not expecting to support yourself with it, because that's so difficult. Having now lived in a small town in Oklahoma for a year and a half, Lincoln is extremely tidy. The streets are clean, the people are friendly. I love seeing the Husker jackets and Husker gear, because I'm in a place now where I see lots of OU stuff, and it just stresses me out to look and see somebody wearing an OU jacket. It's a wonderful relief to see Husker gear.
Welcome to the Jane Pope Geske Heritage Room for Nebraska Authors and the John H. Ames Reading Series. The Heritage Room is a special collection dedicated to preserving and promoting works by and about Nebraska authors. Currently, we maintain a collection of over 11,000 volumes written by more than 3,000 published authors from Nebraska. In one way of promoting these authors, the Heritage Room sponsors the John H. Ames Reading Series. This is our 137th Ames reading. We're well established. I would like to thank the Nebraska Literary Heritage Association, because it is through an endowment established by their volunteer efforts that we are able to bring you programs like these. You should feel that you could come in to visit our collection during regular public service hours when the room looks different, for individual tours, and to enjoy the Heritage Room as a reading room where anyone who is interested can come in and read from our collection. Our reader tonight is Christine Pappas. In order to read here tonight, Christine made the trip from East Central University, Ada, Oklahoma, where she is in her second year as a professor. Lincolnites know her best for the years previous in Lincoln, and the Heritage Room knows her best for all the work she did in the Heritage Room. Clearly out of dedication to Nebraska authors, while she pursued a PhD in political science at UNL. I, for one, remember the schedule she kept. As a graduate student, as a teaching assistant, as founding editor of the Plainsong Review, as reviewer of works by Nebraska authors for the Journal Star, for interviews she conducted for Book Talk, for the books she wrote, and more, because she cared about Nebraska and Nebraska authors. She took a job as aide because that was what she had time for, but before she left for Oklahoma, she was acting curator of the Heritage Room. During her time here, one of her interests was in reading and processing the Dorothy Thomas collection. It was her work on that collection that enabled her to bring together a collection of short stories written by Dorothy Thomas, selected, edited, and with an introduction by Christine, and published by the University of Nebraska Press. It is this book that she will talk about and read from tonight. She has read archived materials that few people have read. Dorothy Thomas always wanted to have a collection of her stories published. Usually she wrote for magazines, and she wanted to be discovered in the 21st century. Christine, with the support of the libraries and the press, has brought this about. We welcome her tonight, Christine Pappas.
It truly is marvelous to be back in the Geske Heritage Room, which is truly one of my favorite places on earth, and it was a true honor to have been able to work here for 5 years. I believe that a better archive of Nebraska's sense of place doesn't exist beyond the Heritage Room. It's just, this is the soul of Nebraska right here. And Joanna sells herself short on her role in helping me finish the archive and also finish the book. We sat side by side and went through, and you can probably see the brown boxes over here. There are 17 boxes of materials that we went through and cataloged over years. It took us years to go through everything. And the papers were literally balled up into little crumpled heaps, and we would have to smooth them out and read them, figure out what they said, and then put them in a series. So it was really quite a large endeavor, resulting in the 17 boxes, a photograph album, which is on the back desk there, and also slides, all kinds of ephemera as well. Tonight, what I want to do is give Dorothy Thomas her due more than hearing my words. I want you to hear the words that she wrote. So I also wanted to point out that Cheryl Daniels, who helped Dorothy place her papers here in the Heritage Room, she did an excellent program on Dorothy's life, and it has slides in it, which is available on video. So if you look for the program Cheryl did on Dorothy Thomas's life, you can see some of the pictures that we currently have in the collection. Dorothy Thomas was born in Barnes, Kansas in 1898. She was the 6th of 10 kids. One of the pivotal experiences in her life was growing up in Alberta, Canada. Her father took the family and all the kids up to Alberta, and there are 3 stories in the collection, The Getaway and Other Stories, that relate events from her time in Canada. Flowers Appear on the Earth, which was in the New Yorker in 1936, The Christmas Whopper, which was in Saturday Evening Post in 1957, and The Girl from Follow, which was in Atlantic Monthly in 1934. So the stories that she tells in those short stories really were based on events in her life, so you can get a good picture of her years there. They had a farm, and they also ran a dining hall for a sawmill, and this is how the family earned their money. And then in 1905, the father of the family died, leaving the rest of them to sort of make do. And after a couple years, they gave up, moving first back to Kansas and then settling in Bethany, Nebraska. And this is Dorothy's family with the 10 kids, all trying to make a go of it. And none of them were making much of a living at the time. The transition from living in Canada in the hard schools up there to moving to Nebraska with a more developed school system was really hard. And Dorothy struggled with schooling, finally dropping out of high school at age 21, not really having much success there. So ironically, she drops out of high school to become a teacher, and she goes out to the country schools in Tryon, Gering, Scottsbluff, and Emerson. And while she was out there teaching, she boarded with families. And this becomes her most noted trope. How she tells a story is she is the narrator standing off stage. She is the boarding school teacher talking about the events of family life as they unfold. And so this point in her life is extremely pivotal as well, because this is how she begins to tell a story. She knows the intimate details, but she's not involved in the action. And there are a couple stories in the book that also deal or are told this way. Grandma Hotel Adams, which was in American Mercury in 1931. The Steckley Girls, which was in American Mercury in 1932, and then the Ma Jeter's Girls stories are told this way. Dorothy is a character in the book, basically a boarding school teacher, who tells the story of all Ma Jeter's girls and how they get pregnant and how they get their husbands to the altar right at the last moment. And that's what each chapter of Ma Jeter's Girls is about. In the Getaway and Other Stories, I included another Ma Jeter girl story called Up in the Hills, which the New Yorker published in 1935. It's sort of a follow-up to the Ma Jeter's Girls book. So if anyone enjoyed that book, they can read Up in the Hills for an update on what's going on with the girl's life. Dorothy came to a turning point when she stopped teaching and started attending college at UNL. She decided she wanted to come back to school. Her sister Kenitha was in school, and Dorothy envied the learning that she was experiencing. And while she was at UNL, she met Lauren Isley, Mabel Langdon, Lori Wimberly. But a really pivotal moment was attending writing class with Orrin Stepanek, a professor in the English department. And he had them all write stories, and Dorothy's story began, "It is good to be young and to wear silk stockings." And Orrin just loved this story. He says, whoever wrote this can write for your life and write for your living. And she quit school, she quit teaching, she quit everything, and she was a writer from that period on. So she was just totally set to leap in and to do it. And so she started to publish stories. She just wrote, and she supported her family through the Great Depression. The period from 1931 to 1941 was extremely fertile for her, and this is when she sold her stories. And this wasn't a good time economically for the country. During this period, she attended the artist colony at Yaddo, and that was pivotal for her. And she also lived in an artist colony in Santa Fe, where she met Frida Lawrence, who is D.H. Lawrence's widow. Some of her best writing occurred in 1936, when she wrote the stories that would become The Home Place, and these were award-winning stories. And she also wrote The Getaway, which is a story that I'll read tonight. And when she wrote The Getaway, she gave it to Harold Ross, who was the publisher of The New Yorker, and Harold said, "This is the best damn story ever to appear in the New Yorker." So she got acclaim from a lot of people at this time. Her last best story is a story called My Pigeon Pair, and she wrote it in 1941, and it was an O. Henry short story. And I'm going to read this one tonight as well. My Pigeon Pair is a complex story. It's sort of dark, but I'm going to start with that one, and then I'll read The Getaway. Dorothy's life changed in 1959. She married the love of her life, a man named John Bickerud, and he wasn't particularly a literary man, but they shared a love of language and a love of poetry. And they retired together, sold their homes, and bought an RV, in essence, and drove around the country and wrote and read poetry. She was sort of a proto-hippie type, I guess. They settled finally in Bronte, Texas, and where she wrote some, and he was a machinist. And they lived together happily until 1990, when she died. And John had died in 1989. In the last couple years of her life, she returned to Lincoln a few times, made a few connections. But her connection with Cheryl Daniels was pivotal because Cheryl eased the papers from Dorothy to the Heritage Room. She helped in this transition. And when I started here, there was just a big heap of boxes, in essence, that was all the papers. And no one had time to go through them and to put them into order, so that became a priority. Okay, so what I'd like to do is begin by reading My Pigeon Pair, which was published in 1941, and was probably Dorothy's last best story. Jenny had left 2 folded extra blankets for me on the large chair at the foot of her bed, and the bed was turned down. The studio was very like others she had lived in, and it was strange to see her bright-colored and oddly matched furniture without her large person moving awkwardly about to make me feel at home among it. All her paintings stood in a dovetailed outlining row on the floor against the 4 walls of the room. In the bathroom, above the old-fashioned oval wash basin, hung 2 medicine cabinets. The one with the red hoop of ribbon hung from its latch would be Jenny's, and the others her roomers. I wondered if Jenny's roomer had come home, and it was then in the little room beyond the bath's other door. I was tired from my trip, and I had my dinner on the train, and so only wanted to go to sleep and be really rested for the morning. I reached for my pocketbook and took out, and by the student lamp that arced from the table at the end of Jenny's bed, reread the note she had sent me. Leaving the key with superintendent. Have to be away, but want you to use the studio just the same. Ring superintendent bell. Don't try to keep food. Roaches and no ice. Eat out. Sleep in studio. Bedroom rented out to girl who clerks. Has own door to hall and bath so won't bother you. Has boyfriend. May be there. May not. Walls thin. If she cries at night, never mind it. Hope elevated doesn't keep you awake. Have a good time. Sorry to miss you. Love, Jenny. I turned off the light, and the squares of the window went from dark blue to gray blue, patterned with rows of lights. The window squares threw a wavering pattern on the wall and on Jenny's haphazard pieces of furniture, and in my weariness I got a feeling as if the place had lately been under water, and that the huddling chairs had been washed there where they stood, and the pictures round the room were flotsam. The elevated trains, on a level with the story below, roared like some mighty chance-timed surf. Rest, comfort even, was not easily come by in Jenny's matter-of-fact bed. I lay and tried to get used to the noise of the trains and of the cars, trucks, and buses in the street below. After a little, I heard a key turning in the lock and started up, thinking that someone was trying to get into the room, and then lay back, remembering the little girl in Ginny's bedroom. The wall was very thin, for I could hear the girl's slow step, and I knew quite well as she moved about what she was doing. I saw her in my imagining, hanging up her coat in a moth-proof cupboard like the one in the studio where I lay, laying her turban and her cotton gloves away in the top drawer of a small chest, and then turning to the kitchen at the end of her room. It must be that the room was about the size of Ginny's bathroom. I heard her turning on the switch of the electric plate, low, medium, and high, the little click of each turn. Then she filled a small tea kettle with water from the bathroom tap. I heard the lid fitted on the kettle and then the grating sound of it being slid onto the burner. A spoon tapped against the side of a smaller pan. I imagined the girl with a limp organdy apron tied about her waist, an apron sent at Christmas time from an aunt in Iowa to remind her of home. Ginny assured me that almost all New York young people were from states away. I saw her stand patiently, waiting for the gray-pink coils to turn fiery red and for the water in the kettle to heat. I heard the sound of a plate thump down on the enamel-topped table, and then knife, fork, and spoon put beside it, and lastly a heavy glass that could only be an emptied and saved jelly glass. A little afterward, the smell of the coffee came to me, and the girl slid a chair to the table and sat down to eat. I wondered how it was that she came home from work so late. Obviously she had not eaten out. There are places possibly where a girl who clerked could shop after work. I wondered if the friend Ginny spoke of in her note would be coming to see the girl. I hoped that he would come and lift the tiredness that was in her steps by saying they would go to a movie. The girl shoved back her chair and for moments walked briskly and determinedly around the room. She was putting things to right, it was plain. She took pillows from the bed against the wall, spanked them, and tossed them back. Then she went back to the table. Whatever disorder there had been in the room had annoyed her, I told myself, and she had needed to right it before she could enjoy her second cup of coffee. There were steps in the hallway that slowed near the studio door, and then the train thundered below. And when quiet came, there were voices in the room beyond the wall. The girl was saying, "I thought you weren't coming. I waited and you didn't come." "I'm sorry," the man said. "I couldn't make it." Both their voices were young. The girl's tired, determinedly steady, with, I felt, kept-back reproach in it. "I thought something must have held you up," she said. "I waited." "I'm sorry," the boy said. "It's all right," the girl said. "I warmed up some stew. Will you have some? I've had all I want." No, thanks," the boy said, and his voice was both tired and wary. "You go ahead and finish your supper." "Well, some coffee then? You'll have some coffee, won't you?" "Thanks." "Wait, here, let me poke a hole in the fork in the holes of this milk can. They stop up. The milk's all right, though. I opened it just last night, and it's been in the shaft all day. There, I've been meaning to go out and get a little pitcher, but I can't seem to remember it at noon." I heard the rattle of the cup and saucer on the enamel-topped table. Then the girl's voice came, tender, half afraid to ask. "You didn't find anything?" "Nope." "Here, take some more milk. Take some sugar." "Thanks." "Ellen? What's the matter?" "Nothing." "I haven't done anything, have I?" "No, of course not." "Then why do you draw your hand away when I touched you?" "I was reaching for the sugar." "Yes, but you drew away." "Don't imagine things, Judy." "I didn't mean to." "The old girl's gone?" I'd been listening as you do to a radio serial, so lost in their talk that I'd forgotten I was listening, and I was startled to have them speak of Jenny. "Yes, she's out of town. I saw her yesterday in the hall, giving Mrs. Grimes the key." "You pay her before she left?" "I sure did. That's what I pay first, my rent. No one can say anything to you about anything if your rent's paid." There was a sudden sharpness in her voice. A train came. When I heard them again, the boy was up from his chair, walking the little walk he could in the length there was in the tiny room. Then he sat down heavily on the bed, and I heard a chair being slid across the room to him, and the girl said, "There, stretch out, Alan, and rest. And please, honey, put your cigarettes in this ashtray." "That's an ashtray?" There was a lightness and a trying at humor in this boy's voice. "It may look like a saucer to you, but it better be an ashtray." How quick she was to answer his lightness with hers. I heard her bring water from the bathroom, and at the little table wash the few dishes, and then set them away in the cupboard over the table. The boy lay on the bed. When she had finished, she came to the bed and sat down beside him. "Hello, Alan," she said. "Hello, Judy," he said. He patted the round of her slender arm. I wanted to get up, to take hold of Jenny's heavy bed and drag it to some other part of the room, as far from the thin wall and from them as possible. But I knew that they did not know I was there, and they believed themselves alone now. after the many times of reminding each other that Jenny was there and might hear them. I tried to remove myself from them and my thoughts, to leave them to themselves and to whatever happiness their being together could bring them. I did my best to feel as a city woman might feel, to hear without hearing, without caring, but it was not easy to turn a night ear to snow sliding from the eaves or branches and to the far barking of neighbors' dogs. I put my mind on the trains and listened for them, counted between their comings, and waited for and heard those crashings in the street below that to a city ear might mean nothing at all if heard, and to me are astounding. The boy and girl talked on, and I heard every word that they said between the coming of the trains. The girl seemed so eager that they be at peace with no differences between them, seemed ready to try to forget some hurt, some unwilling grudge she held against him. "Alan," she said, "why don't you talk to me?" The young man sighed and stirred. "I can't. I don't want to talk. What is there to say?" The girl was still a while, and then said, "You used to talk. You used to always have something to say, things you'd been waiting to say, saving for me." "Did I?" There was a little tenderness along with wonder at this old self of his she spoke of in his voice. "What did I say?" "You know what you said. I know. I remember every word. But I don't want to say it. I don't want me to say it for you. Say it back to you. What good would that be?" "No good, I guess, Judy. Why do we have to talk?" "We don't have to. You're tired, aren't you?" "Yes." Her voice was so low that I could barely hear it, and very gentle. "You're my treasure, my sweet," she said. "You used to always say that to me. My treasure. Now I say it to you. My treasure." Her voice broke suddenly on the word treasure, and I felt more than heard, felt it coming through the thin wall, that he had taken her by the arms and was shaking her. Judy, don't be like this, honey. Can't we just be quiet? Can't I come here and we just rest, just be quiet? Why do we have to be talking? I came, didn't I?" "Yes, but after you made me wait, you let me wait. Do you think I wasn't tired waiting there, standing there so long? I was so tired I could die. I kept saying to myself, would he wait this long for me? Would you, Alan?" "I have, times aplenty. That was long ago. That was before. Would you wait that long now, Alan, and ever come to see me down if I let you down?" Trains drowned them. When I heard them again, I knew the boy was holding her in his arms and was caressing her. "You know what'll happen, Judy, if we go on like this," he was saying. "My God, I thought the last time if we ever went through that again, you started talking again about being scared and what we would do, I'd go crazy. That's what we've got to think about, Judy. Do you think I don't want to love you?" The girl laughed suddenly, like a child, and I heard her quick kisses in her voice between laughing and crying. "Oh, Alan, why did you wait? Why didn't you say so? I don't care. I don't care about anything if you love me. If you tell me you love me, tonight you didn't say it. You didn't come to me and kiss me and say you were sorry. You made me wait. You made me stand there by the door. Honey, I know I'm silly, but I can't help it. If you'll just say it when you come, I can stand being quiet then, just sitting by you and not talking. I can stand our not being together. I can stand our being together. I can stand even being scared like I was last month. I can stand anything." "You think you can now," the boy said, "but, honey, I don't think anything. There isn't anything I have to think about but that you love me, that you said it." "I didn't say it," the boy said playfully. "I just said, honey, don't you think I want to love you?" "Then say it. Say my treasure, and I love you, Judy. I will always love you. Oh, Alan, I know I oughtn't talk like this. I try to hold back talking like this. I don't think a girl ought to, but I love you so. I can't stand on my 2 feet all day and smile and always be nice to people, because I think I know, that when night comes, maybe I'll see you, and I'll hear you, and you'll hold me." "Judy." I heard their kisses. I heard the boy saying doggedly, like a boy talking in his sleep, who has fallen asleep trying to work a hard problem, "Judy, we haven't had anything. I haven't a job. What would happen to you?" I wrapped Jenny's thick pillow about my head, not to hear, and then, under cover of the roaring train, slipped from the bed and went and stood by the studio window, looking down on the tracks and on the street below. I stood with my hands pressed close to my ears, jealous for those two, against myself and my own nearness to their brief and troubled love-making. I wished for a succession of trains that would follow one another without ceasing of sound. I got cold standing there, and when a later train was passing, I went back to bed. "You all right, sweet?" "Yes." "You're not. It wasn't right for you. I know when you pretend. I was afraid it wouldn't be. Ah, Judy, we're too tired, too scared. There's never any peace. Shh, I'm all right. I had a fine time. I really had. No, you didn't. It's different when you do. You just want me to feel good. It was my fault, the girl said. It's just, I'm so tired, that's all. I can't always be like it is sometimes. You know that. You're not sorry? I'm never sorry. Don't you remember, honey, how I wasn't after that first time you said, my brave, good girl? Judy, you think everything's all right. Yes, of course. You won't be scared? You won't worry this time? Not unless I need to. It's all right, Alan. Judy? Yes, darling. Do you care if I go to sleep? No, of course not. You've got to sleep. Will you sleep? Pretty soon I will. I like it, Alan, when you sleep, when you love me and go to sleep. Next to love, that's the nicest, to have you sleep. When you sleep, you know how I feel? His voice was distant with drowsiness. How? Married. That's how. When you sleep with your head on my shoulder and breathe slow like you do, fast asleep, then I'm married. We're married. There's even, don't laugh at me, dear, a ring on my hand. I can feel it without touching it on my other hand, a plain gold band like my grandmother's. Between trains I fell asleep then, and when I woke the girl was crying. She was trying to cry without sound, but I heard her. Finally the boy heard her too, and spoke her name. She answered with only stifled crying. Judy, he said, don't cry. Please don't cry, darling. I don't mean to, the girl said. Go back to sleep, Alan. I can't sleep if you cry. I'll stop as soon as I can. Why are you crying? Because I was so lonesome. Pet, you're not alone. I'm here. Did you sleep? Did you dream something that made you lonesome? No, I didn't sleep. I couldn't get to sleep. And for a moment once, I thought I heard her in there. I thought I heard her turning in the bed, that she'd heard us. But I just imagined that. She's gone. You go to sleep now, Judy. I will, just as soon as I can, Alan. I was thinking about us and how it was at first, how you'd hold me and I'd tremble so, how just to touch your hand, to look up and see you. Alan, what is it that happens? Here, it's just been this little while, these months, and these few times we've been together like this, and something's gone. I love you just the same. I love you awfully. I know that you love me, but, Alan, here, all my life, I wait for love, and it comes, and it's better than I ever dreamed. And in this little time, it changes. I can't bear it to change. I got so lonesome it made me cry. Judy, don't cry. I feel like a louse. I think and think about it, about us. I come here, and I think we'll just talk, just rest, just be quiet together. You're just so nice to be with, Judy, in the same room, talking. I think I'll just talk with you and hold you a little. Yes, yes, the girl said. Never mind, dear. Never mind me talking. Go to sleep. I thought tonight I wouldn't come. I started to meet you and then turned back. I thought I wouldn't come here anymore, Judy. We can't go on like this. It's all right, dear. There's really nothing wrong. My heavens, can't a girl cry a little? Don't ever say that you'll never come. I'll die. I surely shall die, Alan. I'd be so lonesome like I was now forever. He was holding her, comforting her, trying to still her crying that was wild now and unrestrained, like a child's. Somehow I got away into sleep, away from her lessening sobs and the boy's concern. Sleeping, I dreamed that I was lying on a pallet, along with any number of children, visiting children. I thought cousins who had come to stay the night with us in the country. I was the only child among them awake. I raised up on my elbow and looked at the others in the moonlight, at the sleeping children on the pallets of quilts and blankets, and then I saw the two in the next room. But they were not grown, boy and girl, but children, like the rest of us. The girl was still crying a little, in her sleep. Near above me and to one side was a huge canopied bed, and in it slept my father. But he too had wakened. He was resting on an elbow, looking down round at all the sleeping children. I saw his beard moving, and I felt his voice more than heard it, reverberating through the posts of the high bed and along the floor under me. I heard him talking to himself in the night, saying a poem, and his poem was one that I half remembered, and I felt his voice and the poem coming down to us on the pallets. I woke and said all that I could remember of the poem to myself, lying there in Jenny's too hard bed, looking up at the tall empty windows and waiting for the morning to come. My little children twain, my pigeon pair, how will men deem you? As I delighting as I find you now, as full of joy, as passionate as bees battling with flowers, or will a slough of blossomless time engulf you? Oh, little sweetings, whereto are you born? How can I save you? Wide-eyed, I'd waited for the morning. Only once I heard the girl sigh in her sleep and mumble something. When it was not yet light, I heard her getting up, heard her moving from the little room to the bath, walking on tiptoe. Then I heard the tapping of the kettle lid, and after a while smelled the coffee and heard her setting dishes on the table. There was no sound from the boy. At last the girl spoke to him, and I knew that she was sitting for an instant on the edge of the bed. Alan, honey." "What?" he asked from sleep. "I want to tell you something. Are you awake?" "Yeah, I guess so." "Alan, I fixed your breakfast, honey. Just warm up the coffee a little when you get up, but don't get up yet. It's early." "I'll get up." "No, there's no sense in it. No place you'll want to go will be open for hours yet. You rest a little." "You going now?" "Yes, there's a quarter under the cup under your saucer. I'm telling you so you'll be sure to get it." "No, you take it. You'll need it." "No, tomorrow's payday." "Well, I wish you wouldn't." "Thanks, Judy. Gosh, you look pale." "Do I? I think it's just this light." "I'm all right, honey. I think your luck will turn. I think you'll find something today. Will you miss me?" "Yes, Judy, I wish I could come and not make you cry." "You didn't make me cry, honey. I told you. I just got lonesome. A body does get lonesome. You'll come again soon?" "I ought to. Ah, Judy." "I gotta go now, sweet. You heat the coffee, and first you sleep, just as long as you can. A good day to you, Alan." I heard her kiss, not like a lover's, but a quick, firm family kiss that said, "Be good now, look after things, good luck." Then the door closed after her, and I heard her feet walking swiftly along the hall, then running on the stairs. In the growing light, I made out Jenny's paintings lined along the floor against the walls. Sharp pictures they were, village doorways, backyards with clotheslines sagging over cement courts, lamp-posts with gray snow falling through the wheels of light around them, and each picture forced into brave colors that such places, when I had seen them, had never held for me. The girl's steps echoed in my mind, and beyond the wall I heard the boy's breathing in that troubled last sleep before the day. So I chose that story to read because I think it sort of defies the image I think that most Nebraskans have of Dorothy Thomas, that she was a simple writer, that she says that she wrote of love and she liked to give pleasure in her stories. And this one is more complex. It had different layers and it had a deepening complexity to it that is missing in a lot of our other stories. But now the next story I'm going to read is The Getaway, which is the story that Harold Ross said was the best damn story ever in the New Yorker. So it's funny. The other one was a little serious, but this one's a funny story. The Getaway. When the kitchen door slammed to after her little daughters, Mrs. Clint Riggs wiped the children's kisses from her mouth with a plump wrist and dropped into a chair to gulp a last mouthful of coffee. "Gosh, I gotta hustle," she said aloud, and began noisily shoving the 4 chairs back from the kitchen tables against the wall. The table was a mess, but it could stay so. She stuffed her apron, the dish towel, and little Evelyn's bib into the large paper carton in the kitchen corner that served as a clothes hamper. She pulled her dress off over her head, and in her slip, which was split and frayed at the seams, went to the sink, took a washcloth from its nail over the faucet, and rapidly washed the front of her face, her neck, and her armpits. She took her husband's soap-spattered mirror from its hook, shined it quickly against her thigh, and rested it on the window ledge. Then she scrutinized her face, stretching her thick neck to one side and the other. All her makeup necessities were handy, lined up along the upper sashes of the 2 kitchen windows. First she smeared her face with pink cream, rubbing it in well with the heel of her hand, and wiping it off with a family towel. When she had powdered, she reached down for a bottle of toilet water and poured a good teaspoonful of the liquid into the crack at the top of her brassiere. Her hair at the part, she discovered, was a darker yellow than the rest. She patted the gray powder puff along it to even the color. She was remaking her mouth, shaping a more definite Cupid's bow, when someone knocked at the door. She caught up her dress and draped it around her bosom before she called in. "Gosh, Myrtle, you scared me," she said when she saw it was a friend who worked as a waitress in the Odeon Cafe. Her greeting was good-natured, but not exactly cordial. "You going downtown?" the visitor asked. "See you got your good shoes on. Well, hurry, kid, I'll wait for you. You'll have to step on it, though." "I gotta get down there. Tony'll kill me. This is the 3rd day I've been late since he tried to fire me that time." Mrs. Clint Riggs reached for her cup and took another swallow of cold coffee. "Let him wait," she said with a flap of her free hand. "What do you care? Who's he? What do you want to take all you do off that old greaser for anyway, Mert? Why don't you get out? Why don't you tell him where to head in and get out?" Myrtle laughed shortly. "Yeah," she said. "And then what? It ain't so bad." She looked around the disorderly kitchen. "It's a nice cafe." "Myrt, you want me to tell you something?" Mrs. Riggs leaned forward to ask the question. "Well, I'm getting out." "You? Well, where are you going, Gladys? What are you going to do? You going off with somebody?" "Yep, I'm driving to Kansas City." "You going with that guy you was out to Firefly Inn with?" "That's him." "Gee, Gladys, he's swell." "Yep," Gladys said, "he's class. That's what he is. Did you see his car, Myrt?" "You leaving Clint?" "You bet I am." "Well, what about the kids? What about them little girls?" "Clint can find someone to look after 'em. He thinks he's so darn smart. He says I don't know how to raise kids. Well, let's see how good he is at it, the big cheese. Myrt, you'll excuse me, won't you? I gotta hurry. Want to see my hat? I got a new hat." "Clint's out of town, ain't he?" "Yeah, he's out with the truck, but he'll get in tonight. Neighbor will look after the little girls when he gets here. Junior will fix 'em a piece if they're hungry. Junior, that kid'll look after himself." Myrtle got on her feet to go. "Well, I sure wish you luck," she said. "Here, wait a minute. You want to see my hat?" Mrs. Riggs said, and ran into her bedroom and snatched the hat from its paper sack on the dresser. Before the shaving mirror, she put it on her head and turned, smiling for her friend's approval. "Of course, you can't tell so much about it," she said, "without a dress, but don't you like it?" "Sure do," Myrtle answered. "You got the shape to wear a big hat like that, kid. You got the class, too. I like a big hat, but you know I can't wear 'em. I look like a toadstool in 'em. Listen, I gotta get down there. Tony'll fire me again. I sure wish you luck." "You'll keep this under your hat till tomorrow, anyhow," Miss Riggs said. "Sure," Myrtle said. "Won't let out a peep. Goodbye. I'm half an hour late now. Tony'll kill me." When her friends run over heels had taken her down the back steps, Gladys ran into her bedroom, yanked a dusty suitcase from under the bed, tossed it onto the rumpled covers, and began to throw into it pink panties and gowns from the dresser drawers. Then she opened the closet door and felt in the semi-darkness for her plum-colored satin dress. Her hand touched something she thought at first was her husband's other pair of unionalls, and when it moved under her fingers, she screamed and staggered back. "Junior!" she yelled. "Will you come out of there? What are you doing hiding in there? What do you mean playing hooky? Why ain't you up at school?" The boy came stumbling out of the closet, freeing his feet as he came from the clinging folds of the plum-colored satin dress. "I'm going with you," he said. "You are not," his mother said. "Where'd you get that notion? I ain't going anywhere. Mama's not going anywhere, Junior. Junior, look what you're doing. Look what you done to my good dress." She snatched the dress from the floor and held it out to see that it wasn't torn and shook it. "You got it all so wrinkled it hardly ain't fit to wear." "I'm going with you," the boy said. "I'm going to Kansas City." "Kansas City!" his mother cried. "Listen, Junior, Mama's not going to Kansas City. Who told you such a thing? Junior, you get on to school." "You said you were," Junior said stoutly. "I heard you. I heard you and him last night. I was right there by the car. I heard every word you said, and I'm going along." His mother set her arms akimbo, her red-nailed hands on her hips, and looked at him from under the brim of her hat. She sighed, and her bosom heaved under the worn satin of her slip. "Junior," she said, "now listen to Mama. What do you want to go for? Kansas City ain't any fun. Listen, you skin up to school, and Mama will give you 50 cents. The boy shook his carroty head. $1. "No, I'm going along." $2, Junior. "I'm going." "Junior, you can't act like this. Don't you know it's almost time for the last bell? Now you get on to school." "No." "Now, Junior, you're spoiling Mama's trip. I'm just driving down there with a friend, and I'll be back. I'll be right back. $3, Junior. Mama hasn't got but $3. I'm going with you." Mrs. Riggs heard and knew by the way her son had turned his head and narrowed his eyes that he had heard, too, the sound of the car wheels on the gravel beside the house. She came close and put her hands on the boy's shoulder. "Junior," she said almost tearfully, "I'll send you a bicycle." He shook his head and tried to put back away from her. "With a horn and lights and everything," she pleaded. "I'm going with you." With a quick shove, she sent him sprawling into the closet, leaped to shove the door to, and slipped the latch into its catch. "There," she puffed. "Now, Junior, will you quit that pushing? It won't do you any good. The girls will let you out when they come home at noon and fix you something to eat. You can open a can of sardines or something." Well, he kicked and lunged at the door. She got into the rumpled purple dress and pulled on a pair of white gloves. "Gosh, I wish I'd had time to press this," she said, smoothing it over her bust and hips with her hands. "It's a sight. Junior, you quit that kicking now. You make me so jumpy I can't hurry." She snapped the suitcase shut and ran out through the kitchen with it. "Hi," the man in the car said. "Girlie, you had me scared there for a minute. Thought you might have got cold feet." He leaned to swing open the car door for her. "Hi," Mrs. Riggs panted. "I had to hurry so. I don't know whether I'm all together here or not. Will my suitcase sit up here, back of the seat? Oh, gosh, I forgot my purse. I'll be just a minute." "Here's your purse, Mama," Junior said at her elbow. "Why, Junior, how'd you get—" His mother stopped abruptly. The latch on the closet door must have been weaker than she thought. "Junior, why ain't you at school?" she continued more calmly, and got into the car. "Junior, you get along now, and you get to school. You'll be late." "Well, hello," the man said in surprise. "Who's this?" "It's, my boy, Junior," Gladys answered. "Run on now, Junior. Go on. Mama will bring—" Junior climbed into the car, squeezing in between his mother and the driver. "I'll sit in the middle," he cried triumphantly, and grinned up at the man with the missing tooth grin. "I always ride in the middle of the truck." "We'll see here. Let's get this straight," the man said. "You didn't say you had a kid. You didn't." "I'm the oldest. I'm 9, Junior told him before his mother could speak. "And Lola Bell's next, and Evelyn's the baby. She's in 1st grade. "Well, say," the man said. "Oh," Gladys said, "he's just acting up. Junior, get out now. I can explain it to you. I was going to tell you last night. We got to talking about something else, and I forgot, I guess. Say, the neighbors are looking out the windows. Wouldn't you just drive up the street a bit, out onto the highway, out of town, out by the campgrounds, and I'll explain. Won't you just—" "Okay," the man said, with a glance toward the slightly lifted window curtain of the house on the right. "Okay, but is this kid coming along?" "No, I should say not," Gladys said, "but he's got a notion he wants to go, and I can't get it through his head that he ain't going to. Junior, you're going to get out when we get up here to Center Street and run on over to school. I'll write you an excuse when I get back. Mama'll—" "I'm going along," Junior said. "Ain't I? Can't I, mister?" "Junior, Mama'll be back. She's just driving down to Kansas City with just this gentleman to do a little shopping. I'll bring you— Turn here, go out this way, out by the campgrounds, will you please? And then we can cut over to the highway from there. Junior, you gotta mind Mama now. I'll tell you, Junior, you're acting awful." "How far is it? How far to Kansas City?" Junior asked, looking up at the man and ignoring his mother. "Well, say," the man said, "what is this? I sure want you to go, girlie, but I don't think we ought to take this kid. You know what they could get us for that? They could make trouble for us, don't you know that?" "Dad won't care," Junior said. "I go with him in the truck sometime." "Is this the campgrounds up here ahead?" the man asked. "I don't see any cabins. Can't you do anything with this kid?" He turned to Junior. "See here, Captain, I'll give you $1. "It's not a cabin camp," Gladys explained. "It's a camp meeting camp, where they have camp meetings. It's not used but in the middle of summer. If you'll just stop here, I'll talk to Junior." "Okay," the man said, and turned from the pavement onto the dirt lane that led up to the weathered pavilion. "Junior," Gladys said, "you get out now. You get out and let Mama talk to you for a minute. Mama wants to tell you something." "No," Junior said. "Come on," his mother urged. "Junior, you can stand by the road and thumb a ride in easy. You don't even have to go to school. You can go home and play jacks and listen to the radio or just whatever you want until noon. There's some gum in the kitchen cupboard and a teacup. Junior, 2 sticks." "I'm going with you and him," Junior said. Mrs. Riggs got out of the car. "Come on," she pleaded desperately. "Come on, Junior, just come over here to the bench and let Mama talk to you." She took hold of his shoulders and pulled with all her might, but Junior grabbed the steering wheel and held on. "Please," she said to the man, smiling at him, a quick smile from under her hat, "if you just take Junior's hands off the wheel and give him a little push, will you?" "Sorry, Captain," the man said to Junior and loosened Junior's hands. The boy's hands let go so suddenly that Mrs. Riggs sat down on the ground and Junior clasped to her bosom. "Junior," she panted when all she could get was her breath. "Listen to Mother. I'll bring you." Look it, Junior yelled. "He's going! He's getting away!" Mrs. Riggs struggled to her feet and stood waveringly, her high heels digging deep into the damp, leafy foam. "Maybe he's just turning around," she said. "Maybe—" "Nah, he's heading for the other gate," Junior said. "Well, that's a low-down, mean trick," Gladys cried. "Junior, now look what you did." She stuck out her lip and swung her hand to box Junior on the ear, but the boy dodged. She walked to the nearest bench and sat down. "Junior, how far out are we?" she asked. "How far is it to home?" "I don't know," Junior asked. "About 2 miles, maybe 2 1/4. He came and sat down beside his mother. "Well, however am I going to walk in these shoes?" Mrs. Riggs asked. "I can't, that's all. They're killing me now." "Take 'em off," Junior suggested. He looked ruefully at the disappearing car and leaned to pull a blade of grass and put it between his teeth. His mother took off one of her pumps and then the other. "Gosh, that's a relief," she said. And then, ain't that the low-downest dirty trick you'd ever heard of? Junior, what's that? What's that weed over there? Huh? Junior asked. That weed, his mother said, pointing with her gloved hand. Ain't that a green weed, Junior? It is, sure as anything. That's a dandelion for boiled greens. Mine, look what a lot of 'em there is. If I had anything to pick 'em in, I'd pick a mess for supper. They're so good. You could pick 'em in your jacket, Junior suggested. This ain't a jacket, honey, Mrs. Riggs told him. It looks like a jacket, but it ain't. It's part of my dress. Well, you could pick 'em in your hat, then. Mrs. Riggs took the hat from her head and turned it upside down on her lap. Why, so I could, she said. You got a head on you, Junior. We'll fill it up, and then we'll get out on the road and thumb a ride in. There's trucks will pick up Mrs. Clint Riggs and Son. Your father's a good truck driver, Junior, as known by all of 'em. Yes, sir, we'll pick 'em in my hat, a good big mess of 'em, and then we'll have 'em boiled for supper, with salt pork. Your dad's crazy about 'em. Don't you love Gladys? She's great. She's got class.